Imagine being a teenager, feeling untouchable, and looking for a way to prove yourself to your friends. It's the kind of thing many of us have experienced, that craving to be noticed, to do something bold, to push the boundaries just a little bit further. Now picture this. You've been walking by an old man's house for weeks, hearing the whispers from your friends, who say he's a weird, creepy guy. His house, run down. His yard, full of overgrown weeds, and a dilapidated fence that has seen better days. To most, it's just another aging home in the neighborhood, something that doesn't matter, something that won't be missed. But what if I told you that the decision to target this man's property, something that seemed so small and harmless at first, would be the turning point of a story that no one expected? A story that would change everything for one teenager, leaving him questioning his life, his choices, and the very nature of justice. This isn't just about a prank gone wrong. It's about a lesson learned in the most unexpected way. But before you think you've figured it all out, let me tell you something that's going to keep you glued to this screen. What happened next will make you rethink everything you know about revenge, consequences, and redemption. If you think the story ends with a simple apology or a moment of regret, you're wrong. Stick with me, because you're about to get answers to a question you didn't even know you were asking. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Let me take you back to that summer evening. It was a warm night, the kind of night that encouraged you to be outside, hanging out with your friends. The sun was dipping low, and the air was filled with the hum of neighborhood life, distant chatter, the sound of kids playing, and the occasional dog barking. For the teen in this story, the night started just like any other. But as he walked past the old man's house again, something inside him snapped. Maybe it was the boredom. Maybe it was the peer pressure from his friends, daring him to do something out of character, something that would make him look tough. Maybe it was the sheer thrill of rebellion. Whatever it was, the decision was made, and it was going to happen. Without a second thought, the teen decided to make his mark on the old man's fence, a rundown, battered structure that had seen better days. Maybe he thought it wouldn't matter. After all, it was just a fence. Maybe he figured that no one would care, that it would be forgotten by morning. What he didn't know, though, was that the consequences of his actions would ripple out in ways he never expected. This was not just some random act of vandalism. This was a moment that would alter his life forever, sending him down a path that would make him wish he could turn back time. And here's where the twist comes in, and I promise, this is the part that will keep you hooked. After the deed was done, the teen felt a rush of adrenaline, thinking he had pulled off a successful stunt. But little did he know that his actions were about to lead him face to face with something much bigger than he could have imagined. The next day, when the old man saw the damage to his property, he didn't react the way the teen expected. He didn't call the cops, didn't scream or shout. Instead, he did something that sent a chill down the teenager's spine. The teen couldn't have known then, but his world was about to be flipped upside down in a way that no one saw coming. And now, this is where I need you to pay close attention, because I'm about to give you the answer that will make you feel that sense of intrigue building inside you. You see, the old man had a secret, one that no one in the neighborhood knew about. And that secret had everything to do with the person who lived next door. The identity of the person next door wasn't just a random detail. It was the key to the entire story. The reason the old man wasn't as powerless as he appeared. The reason the teen's actions would come back to haunt him in the most unexpected way. You're probably wondering, who could this person be? What was so special about the neighbor? Well, I can tell you this. What you're about to learn is going to blow your mind. It's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about the old man, the teen, and what happens when you mess with someone you don't truly understand. The question that lingers now, the one I need you to stick around to answer, is, how did the teen react when he learned who lived next door? And what did the old man do with this information? Was the vandalism just a mistake that could be easily fixed, or did it set off a chain of events that no one, especially the teen, could have predicted? The truth, my friend, is more shocking than you could imagine. So, if you're curious to see how this all unfolds, if you want to know what happens when a seemingly harmless act of rebellion turns into a life-changing lesson, stay tuned. You're about to witness a tale of regret, redemption, and the powerful way that sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest consequences. And trust me, you'll want to see how it all plays out. Keep watching, because what happens next will leave you speechless. As the teen walked away from the scene, a strange sense of satisfaction filled him. His heart raced with the kind of energy only a rebellious act could bring. For a moment, it felt like he had won, like he was finally breaking free from the monotony of his life, doing something that mattered, something that made him feel important. It wasn't just the thrill of the vandalism. It was the validation from his friends, the sense that he had done something bold, something they would talk about for weeks to come. But as the night wore on, that initial rush of excitement began to fade, and an uneasy feeling settled in. Something about the whole thing felt off. Perhaps it was the look in the old man's eyes when he saw the damage to his fence. Or maybe it was the lingering feeling that this wasn't just some random act of mischief, that there was something more to this situation than he could comprehend. At that moment, he shrugged it off, convincing himself that the next day would bring nothing more than a few angry words and a reminder to never mess with the elderly again. He didn't realize then that the consequences of his actions would unravel in ways he couldn't even begin to fathom. The teen's life hadn't always been like this. Not long ago, he was just another kid trying to figure out who he was in the chaos of high school. He wasn't exactly a troublemaker, but he wasn't exactly a model student either. He lived in a neighborhood where appearances were everything, and he spent most of his days trying to fit in with the crowd, to align himself with the right group of friends. There was a certain pressure that came with being part of a clique, the kind of pressure that whispered to you when you weren't measuring up, when you weren't doing enough to keep your reputation intact. In the beginning, it was all about getting noticed, making sure people knew who you were, even if it meant pushing boundaries. But somewhere along the way, things started to shift. The friends who once cheered him on, who encouraged him to take risks, began to change. They weren't the carefree group they used to be. The lighthearted dares turned into challenges that felt darker, more dangerous, and they began to pull him into situations he couldn't always control. It was as if the very essence of fun had been replaced by a need for thrills that teetered dangerously close to chaos. And the old man's house, with its broken-down fence and untended yard, became the perfect target, an easy way to get that rush without thinking of the consequences. As the teen pondered his actions in the quiet of his room later that night, a deep sense of unease took root. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen, something he wasn't prepared for. Maybe it was just guilt creeping in, but there was a nagging thought in the back of his mind, a thought that lingered as the moonlight streamed through his window. He hadn't seen the old man in person much, but there was something unsettling about him. He was always a bit of an enigma, the kind of person that people in the neighborhood whispered about. No one knew much about him, but rumors swirled. Some said he was a war veteran. Others claimed he had lost his family in a tragedy and had become a recluse. No one could say for sure, but the air of mystery surrounding him only added to the sense of unease. What if, just what if, he wasn't as harmless as he seemed? What if there was more to this man than the neighborhood had ever known? The teen tried to ignore the thought, but it stayed with him, gnawing at the edges of his mind. His thoughts drifted to the other strange happenings in the neighborhood. There were the occasional whispers about things that didn't seem quite right, odd noises at night, lights flickering in the old man's house when everyone else's was off, and the strange figures who sometimes visited late into the evening. The teen had never really paid attention before, dismissing it as typical neighborhood gossip, but now that he had crossed the line with his act of vandalism, those whispers felt a little more ominous, a little more real. He couldn't help but wonder, had he just made a serious mistake? Was this old man someone worth crossing? The next morning, he set out for school, trying to shake off the previous night's events, but his mind was still racing. It was the first time in a long time that he felt truly unsettled. The usual banter with his friends couldn't distract him, and as he sat in class, his thoughts kept drifting back to the fence. It wasn't just about the fence anymore. It was about the strange things he had noticed around the old man's house. And it was about the nagging feeling that there was something bigger happening here, something that wasn't immediately obvious. Maybe it was just his imagination running wild, but he couldn't help but wonder if he had just opened a door that would lead him down a dangerous path. When the school day ended, he walked home with the same restless feeling, his footsteps dragging as if he knew something was waiting for him. And when he rounded the corner onto a street, His gaze immediately landed on the old man's house. It was then that he saw it, the unexpected sight that made his stomach drop. There, standing in the yard next door, was a man he had never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a sharp, dark suit. His presence seemed out of place in the quiet neighborhood, and the teen instinctively took a step back, hiding behind a tree to avoid being seen. The man didn't belong there. At least, not in the way the other neighbors did. There was something about him, something that didn't sit right. The teen could feel his heart begin to race. Who was this man? Why was he there? And why did it feel like everything was connected? The unease settled deeper into his bones, and he couldn't shake the thought that his actions had triggered something far bigger than he had ever anticipated. Had he stumbled upon a secret? Or was the universe simply toying with him, setting him up for a twist he couldn't yet comprehend? With every passing minute, the mystery seemed to grow, and the teen knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Whatever was going on next door, whatever secret the old man had been hiding, it was far more than the teen could have ever imagined, and now he was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. The days that followed only deepened the sense of dread in the teen's chest. The man in the suit had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared, and although he kept his eyes peeled for any sign of him, there was no trace. The old man's house looked the same as it always had, weathered, faded, with that haunting quiet surrounding it, and for a brief moment, the teen convinced himself that maybe it had all been a mistake. Maybe it had been nothing more than an overactive imagination, fueled by guilt and the anxiety of what he had done. But deep down, he knew he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There were too many pieces to the puzzle, too many unanswered questions, and he couldn't simply walk away from it.
Not now.
Not after everything that had happened. One afternoon, as he walked by the old man's house again, he noticed something different, something that made his pulse quicken. The fence, the very one he had defaced, was being repaired. It was being replaced, piece by piece, with fresh wood. But what caught his eye wasn't the new fence. It was the strange figure standing by the side of the house, speaking with the old man. The man in the suit. The same man he had seen days before. This time, however, there was something more sinister in the air. Their conversation was low and hushed, and the teen couldn't make out the words, but the intensity of the exchange sent a chill down his spine. He instinctively ducked behind the nearby bush, trying to stay hidden, his heart thumping in his chest. Why was this man still here? What were they discussing? It was clear now that the connection between the two went deeper than he had initially thought. But before he could gather his thoughts, a shadow moved across the street. A car pulled into the driveway of the house next door, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place in the otherwise humble neighborhood. The driver was a middle-aged man, impeccably dressed, and he stepped out with a kind of authority that immediately caught the teen's attention. He didn't say a word as he approached the old man's house, but the air around him seemed to crackle with tension. Something told the teen that he was about to uncover something that would change everything. But as he tried to inch closer to hear the conversation, something unexpected happened. The teen's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from one of his friends, a warning to stay away from the old man's house. It was a short, cryptic message that simply read, "Stop digging. It's not worth it." He stared at the screen, his heart racing. It felt like a threat. No one else knew what he was doing. No one else knew that he had been watching the old man's house, or had seen the man in the suit. He was about to delete the message, but then another text came through, this time from an unknown number. The message was even more chilling. "If you don't stop now, you'll regret it. Stay away from the fence, stay away from the house, or things will get much worse for you." The teen froze, his mind racing with questions. Who was this? How did they know? And what was so dangerous about the old man's house that they were willing to go to such lengths to intimidate him into stopping? The sudden threat felt like a warning he couldn't ignore. And yet, the curiosity burned inside him. Something was telling him that there was more to this story than he could ever have imagined, and he couldn't just walk away from it. But now, there was fear too. Fear of what might happen if he continued down this path. He debated for a long moment, the tension in his gut growing with each passing second. But his resolve wasn't broken just yet. He needed to know the truth. He had to find out what the old man was hiding, why this mysterious group seemed so determined to keep him from learning more. But in that moment, just as he was about to move closer to the house again, something completely unexpected happened. A woman appeared from behind the old man's house, a woman who the teen had never seen before. She was older, but not much older than him, and there was a quiet confidence in the way she moved. Her gaze swept across the street, and for a brief second, their eyes met. A strange, knowing look passed between them, as if she had been waiting for him. The woman's lips parted, and the teen could swear she was about to speak, but before a word left her mouth, she quickly turned and disappeared into the backyard. The teen stood there, frozen, his mind racing. Who was she? Was she another ally of the old man? Or was she something else entirely? Why had she looked at him like that? As he pondered these questions, something else caught his eye. The black sedan was gone. The man in the suit was gone. And the old man's house? It was quiet once again, eerily still, as if nothing had ever happened. It was almost as if the entire encounter had been a figment of his imagination. But just as the teen was about to leave, a loud crash broke the silence. It came from behind the house, from the very spot where the old man's fence had been. The sound was unmistakable. Something had been knocked over, something heavy. His heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, he rushed around the side of the house, determined to find out what was going on. But by the time he arrived, everything had changed. The area around the fence was empty, and the old man was gone. The only thing left was a small, crumpled piece of paper lying on the ground, half buried in the dirt. His hands shook as he picked it up, unfolding it carefully. The note was short, written hastily in a dark ink that seemed to smear as he touched it. It read, "It's not just a fence. Don't trust anyone." The teen's mind spun. What had he just uncovered? What had the old man been trying to tell him? And why did it feel like the deeper he dug, the more things were being hidden from him? Who could he trust? And what was it that the old man had known all along? As he stood there, holding the note, the uneasy feeling from before returned, 10 times stronger. Something was happening. Something he couldn't control, and the more he tried to uncover, the more the mystery seemed to slip further out of his grasp. He had crossed a line now, and there was no going back. But with each new clue, with each new twist, he couldn't help but wonder, was he getting closer to the truth, or was he simply walking into a trap? As the teen stood there, the crumpled note still clutched in his hand, the unease in his chest grew heavier. Something about it felt wrong, almost too ominous to ignore. The words, "Don't trust anyone," echoed in his mind, and the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a stone. He couldn't help but wonder if this was more than just a simple act of vandalism gone awry. There was clearly more to the old man's life, a hidden past that was being protected, a secret buried beneath years of silence. But as the mystery deepened, so did the web of lies, and he began to realize that he wasn't the only one caught in it. The next day, as he prepared to meet his friend Ryan, he noticed something that immediately caught his attention. Ryan had always been the cautious one in their group, the voice of reason, the one who steered them away from trouble when things started to get out of hand. But when Ryan arrived at their usual hangout spot, there was something different about him. His usual easygoing smile was gone, replaced by a tense, almost haunted expression. The teen noticed that his friend was gripping his phone tighter than usual, his knuckles white, as though he was holding onto it for dear life. "Hey man, everything okay?" the teen asked, trying to mask his own growing anxiety with a casual tone. But Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around nervously, as though making sure no one was listening in. His gaze flickered to the ground, avoiding the teen's eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I got a message, just like you," Ryan said, his words coming out in a rushed, disjointed manner. "A text telling me to stop digging into stuff. It said something like, 'If you don't stop now, you'll regret it.'" It sounded almost exactly like the one you got. The teen felt his stomach drop. The messages, the warnings, they weren't just for him. They were targeting Ryan too. His mind raced as he tried to process the connection. How could they know? How could someone have known that Ryan was involved? He wasn't even close to the old man's house, didn't know anything about what the teen had discovered. It was a chilling realization that the web of mystery had expanded far beyond the old man's property. Someone or something was pulling strings in ways they couldn't even begin to understand. "You got a message too?" the teen asked, his voice tight, struggling to keep his thoughts in check. "What else did it say? What do you know?" Ryan hesitated before speaking again, the words hanging heavy in the air. "I tried to ignore it, thought it was just some prank or some kind of coincidence. But then last night I saw something that doesn't make sense. I was walking home, just a normal evening, and I passed by the old man's house. And I swear, I saw the woman, the one from behind the fence. She was standing at the window, staring out. It was like she was waiting for something, waiting for someone." Ryan's voice faltered as he continued. "I'm telling you, man, something is going on there. Something bad. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. It's like the whole neighborhood is connected, like we're all tied into this somehow. And now we're being warned to stay away, like we've crossed a line that's bigger than we realize." The teen stood there, trying to process Ryan's words. The woman, the one who had looked at him with that strange, knowing expression, she was now part of this twisted puzzle.
But why?
What was her role in all of this? And why had Ryan seen her? The growing sense of mystery and danger felt like a tidal wave about to crash, and every step they took only seemed to drag them deeper into something they couldn't escape. "Ryan," the teen finally said, his voice low but urgent. "We can't back out now. There's too much at stake. We need to figure out who the woman is, what the old man's hiding, and why they're so determined to shut us down. Something tells me we're on the verge of something huge. And if we walk away now, we might never get the chance to understand what's really going on here." Ryan looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. But before he could respond, another sudden shockwave rocked their world. From behind them, a low hum filled the air, faint at first, but growing louder by the second. Both teens turned toward the source of the sound, and what they saw froze them in their tracks. A black SUV, the same one that had parked in the old man's driveway a few days ago, was slowly rolling down the street, its tinted windows obscuring the driver's face. It came to a slow stop right in front of them, and for a brief moment, neither of them moved. The air seemed thick with tension as the engine sputtered to silence. And then, the door opened. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped out. The same man in the suit. The teen's heart pounded in his chest, and Ryan's eyes widened with recognition. Before they could even react, the man spoke in a deep, commanding voice that sent a chill up their spines. "You're digging in places you shouldn't be," the man said, his words as cold as ice. "And that's a problem. You'd be wise to stop before things get much worse for you. Trust me, you don't want to know what happens next." The warning hung in the air, but the teen didn't flinch. Instead, he stood taller, his resolve growing stronger with each passing second. This was it. This was the moment. He could either step back and live with the fear, or he could push forward and uncover the truth, no matter what it cost. But before he could make a decision, the man in the suit did something that left them both in complete shock. He pulled something out from his jacket pocket and tossed it at their feet. A small, faded photograph, barely held together by the years. The image was of a much younger man, standing next to the old man, both smiling. But there was something in their eyes, something that spoke of betrayal. The teen bent down to pick it up, his fingers trembling as he turned the photo over. Written in pencil, faint but readable, were two words: family secrets. And just like that, everything shifted. The stakes were higher than they could have ever imagined, and now the teen and Ryan were tangled in a mystery much bigger than they could ever have predicted. Who could they trust? What was the connection between the old man, the mysterious man in the suit, and the woman they had seen watching from the window? And most importantly, what were they really up against? The twists kept coming, and the answers felt farther away than ever before. But one thing was clear: they couldn't stop now. Not after everything they had uncovered. Not after everything they were about to learn. The following days after the encounter with the man in the suit felt like a descent into some kind of waking nightmare. At first, the teen tried to convince himself that he was overreacting, that maybe the mysterious photo was just some old relic, a relic of some forgotten past that didn't mean anything. He kept telling himself that the warning, the man's threat, was just a bluff, a power play designed to scare him into backing off. But as much as he tried to push those thoughts aside, a nagging sense of dread gnawed at him. He couldn't ignore the fear creeping into his bones, nor the way the world around him felt suddenly much smaller, much more suffocating. He wasn't just being followed by shadows anymore. He was being hunted. It started with the strange feeling of being watched. Every time he stepped outside, he couldn't shake the sensation that someone was lingering just out of sight, observing him. It was subtle at first. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. A figure passing by in the distance when no one should have been there. But the unease soon turned into something more. One night, as he was walking home from school, the distant sound of a car engine sputtering to life echoed in his ears, almost imperceptibly. At first he ignored it. But then, just as he turned the corner onto a street, he heard the engine again. Louder this time. Closer. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the faint glow of headlights in the distance, the same black SUV. The one he had seen the man in the suit drive. It was parked down the road, idling in the shadows, almost as though it was waiting for him. His heart hammered in his chest. For a moment, he froze, unsure of what to do. His feet felt like lead, his entire body tense, like a deer caught in headlights. What did they want from him? Why hadn't they left him alone? Panic clawed at him, urging him to run, to do anything but stand there. But before he could move, the car's headlights flickered off, leaving the street in complete darkness. He didn't wait to see what would happen next. He sprinted toward his house, every step faster than the last, his mind racing with fear and confusion. When he reached his front door, he slammed it shut, locking it with shaking hands, and leaned against it, trying to catch his breath. But even as he stood there, heart pounding in his chest, something inside told him that the danger wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The next morning, when he went to school, the feeling of being followed hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Everywhere he went, his eyes darted to every corner, every shadow. The constant unease turned his nerves raw. But when he saw Ryan that morning, something in his friend's eyes stopped him in his tracks. Ryan looked different. Dark circles hung under his eyes, his expression hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. His hands trembled as he shoved them into his pockets, and when their eyes met, it was clear that Ryan was terrified. "Did you see it?" Ryan asked in a hoarse whisper, glancing nervously around the hallway. "Last night I got a visit. Someone knocked on my door around midnight. A man in a black suit. He said he had a message for me for both of us." Ryan's voice quivered, his breath catching in his throat as he recounted what had happened. "He told me to stop asking questions. He said that if we didn't, the next time it wouldn't just be a warning." The teen's stomach twisted at the words. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. It wasn't just a warning or an intimidation tactic. They were involved in something much bigger than they realized. Something dark and dangerous. And it wasn't going to stop until they were either silenced or pushed out of the picture completely. But that wasn't the worst part. As the conversation shifted, Ryan's voice dropped even lower, barely audible, as if he were confessing a secret that was too heavy to bear. "I saw something too, right before the knock. I went to the window, and there, across the street in the yard next to the old man's house, there was someone standing. A shadow. It looked like the woman we saw before. But this time, she was holding something. Something shiny, and it was a knife. She was standing there, looking right at me, like she knew I was watching." Ryan paused, looking away, clearly haunted by the image. "I swear, she saw me. I think she knows I'm onto her. And now, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm safe anymore." A cold chill ran down the teen's spine. Ryan's fear was palpable, but it was the look in his eyes that made it worse. There was no denying it. They were being watched. Everything they did, Every move they made was being tracked. They were no longer in control of the situation. And neither of them had any idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. That night, as the teen lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something bad. The shadows outside his window seemed darker, deeper, and the wind whispered a warning through the trees. It was a restless night. Every creak of the house, every shift in the wind, made him jump. He knew he should sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The feeling of being trapped, of being hunted, clawed at his chest. He kept imagining that black SUV, waiting just outside his window, watching, waiting for him to make the wrong move. And then, just as his eyes fluttered closed in exhaustion, his phone buzzed. His heart skipped a beat as he grabbed it from his nightstand, unsure of what to expect. When he saw the message, his blood ran cold. It wasn't from Ryan. It wasn't from anyone he knew. It was from an unknown number. The message was short, almost too simple. You've gone too far. We've given you enough chances. Don't make us come for you next. The phone slipped from his hand as his world came crashing down around him. This was no longer a game, no longer a mystery to solve. It was real. It was personal. And now, the people behind all of this weren't just threatening him. They were coming for him. Every part of his body screamed to run, to get out of town, to hide. But even as he felt that urge, something else gripped him. A burning need to know the truth. The truth behind the old man, the woman, the man in the suit, everything. But at what cost? How far would he have to go? And who would be the next to disappear? As the teen stared at the blank screen of his phone, a chilling thought crossed his mind. Could he trust anyone anymore? He didn't have an answer, and it made his fear all the more suffocating. The pieces were falling into place, but every answer he found only led to more questions. And now they were getting closer, closer than ever before. Just when the teen thought he had a grasp on the situation, just when the weight of fear and suspicion felt like it would crush him, everything shattered in an instant. It was a Friday night when everything changed, when the last thread of certainty he had clung to unraveled in the most unexpected way. He had decided to meet Ryan again, desperate for answers, trying to piece together the strange, fragmented events that had been consuming their lives for the past few weeks. They had arranged to meet at their usual spot, a quiet park near their homes. It was a place they used to hang out at as kids, a safe place, or so they thought. But now, even that sanctuary felt tainted by the weight of the mystery hanging over them. When the teen arrived, Ryan was already there, sitting on one of the old, weathered benches, his face buried in his hands. The look on his face was one of exhaustion, fear, and confusion. As the teen approached, Ryan looked up, his eyes wide, almost frantic. He didn't greet him in his usual way. Instead, he stared at the teen, as if searching for something that wasn't there. "You're not going to believe this," Ryan said, his voice shaking. The teen's stomach dropped as he took a seat beside him, his mind racing. "I don't know what's real anymore. I thought I was onto something, but now I'm not so sure." Ryan took a deep breath, clearly struggling to get the words out. "I found something. Something that changes everything." The teen's heart skipped a beat. What was Ryan talking about? Had he discovered something new, something that would finally bring answers? Or was this just another piece of the puzzle that would lead them further down the rabbit hole? He pressed Ryan, desperate to know what had happened. Ryan handed him a small, folded piece of paper. It was old, frayed at the edges, like it had been sitting untouched for years. The teen unfolded it slowly, his fingers trembling with anticipation. The note was written in neat, precise handwriting, but the words felt like a punch to the gut. It read, "The truth about your family is closer than you think. Stop digging. Your own blood is in more danger than you realize." The teen stared at the paper, his mind reeling. What did this mean? His family? The message made no sense. Who was threatening them, and why? It wasn't just some random warning anymore. This was personal. But then, Ryan dropped another bombshell that turned the teen's world upside down. "You need to understand something," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The old man, he's not who you think he is. He's not just some innocent bystander in all this. He's been hiding something for years. A secret. And I think he's been trying to protect you. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The teen turned to Ryan, his mind racing. Protect him? The old man?
How could that be?
Everything they had discovered up until now pointed to the opposite. The man in the suit, the mysterious woman, the threats, they all led to the old man being involved in some kind of dark, dangerous game. But now, Ryan was telling him something entirely different. I don't know how to explain it, Ryan continued, his voice shaking with the weight of his revelation. But I've been talking to some people.
People I trust.
People who knew the old man before he moved here. They told me that he's not just a retired hermit. He's been in hiding for years, running from something that could destroy him and anyone connected to him.
You, me, us.
We're all tied up in it. The teen's mind was spinning. He had thought he understood the situation. He had thought that he was piecing together the truth. But now, Ryan's words cast everything in a completely new light. What if the old man wasn't the villain? What if he was a victim, just like them, caught up in a web of deceit and danger that stretched far beyond their understanding? And then, just when it seemed like the mystery couldn't get any more twisted, a familiar voice interrupted their conversation. A voice the teen had never expected to hear in this context. I think it's time I explained everything, came a calm, measured voice from behind them. The teen's heart leapt into his throat as he turned around. Standing there, in the shadows of the park's trees, was none other than the woman. The one they had seen standing by the window, holding the knife. The one who had been lurking in the background of their investigation, like some silent specter. But this time, there was no knife in her hand. She wasn't there to threaten them.
She was there to talk.
Who are you? The teen demanded, his voice laced with a mixture of fear and anger. This woman had been the source of so many questions, so many unsettling moments. He wanted answers. He needed answers. The woman took a step forward, her eyes locked on his. There was something in her gaze that softened, something almost familiar. I'm not your enemy, she said quietly. I've been trying to stop all this from happening. Trying to keep you safe. She paused, as if weighing her next words carefully. You need to understand something. The old man, he's your grandfather. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The teen's mind couldn't process what he was hearing. His grandfather? But that didn't make sense. He had never met the man before. His family had never mentioned anything about him. His parents had always said that his grandparents had passed away when he was too young to remember. How could this woman be telling him the truth? I know this is hard to believe, she continued, her voice calm but urgent. But your family has been hiding from something much bigger than you can imagine. And now it's all coming to a head. You've been dragged into this whether you like it or not. The secrets your family has been keeping, the danger they've been running from, it's all been leading to this moment. The teen felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his family, was suddenly in question. Nothing made sense anymore. Who was this woman? How could she know so much about him? And why had his parents kept this from him? You need to leave, the woman said urgently. Get out of town. Get as far away as you can. They're coming for you, and they won't stop until they get what they want. The teen stood there, frozen, as the weight of her words settled in. They're coming for you. The warning echoed in his head, and for the first time, he truly understood the gravity of the situation. Everything he thought he knew about the people in his life, about the mystery he had been chasing, had been a lie. The real truth was far darker, far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And as the woman disappeared back into the shadows, leaving him with more questions than answers, the teen realized one thing. He couldn't trust anyone. Not even Ryan. Not even himself. The real story was only just beginning, and it would take him to places he never wanted to go. The next few days felt like a blur of confusion and dread, the weight of the woman's words hanging over the teen like a storm cloud that wouldn't dissipate. They're coming for you. He couldn't escape them, couldn't outrun the fear that gnawed at him from the inside. Every noise, every movement, seemed like a threat, as if the world around him was conspiring to swallow him whole. The warning had been clear: get out of town. Get as far away as you can. But how could he leave? How could he walk away from everything he knew, from the people who had been his entire life? Even more pressing, how could he abandon the truth when it was so close to being uncovered? Every fiber of his being screamed for him to run, to protect himself. But something deeper inside him, something he couldn't quite shake, told him that if he did, he'd be running from the answers he had fought so hard to find. It wasn't just the woman's warning that kept him up at night. It was Ryan. His friend had become more distant over the past few days, his behavior erratic, his words carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Every conversation felt strained, like there was something unsaid, something lurking between them. The trust that had once defined their friendship was fraying at the edges, and with every passing day, the teen felt the painful tug of doubt. What if Ryan knew more than he was letting on? What if he had been hiding something all along, playing a role in this twisted game without telling him? The thought gnawed at him, making his insides twist with suspicion and betrayal. On a rainy Tuesday evening, as the teen sat alone in his room, trying to piece together the fragmented clues of the mystery, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Ryan. His heart skipped a beat as he read it. "Meet me at the old spot.
Now."
It's urgent." The words were short, urgent, and filled with an undertone of something the teen couldn't quite identify. Without thinking, he grabbed his jacket and rushed out the door. His mind was racing, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something that would force him to make a choice he wasn't ready for. When he arrived at the park, the scene was eerily quiet. The usual murmur of the city in the background was drowned out by the pounding of the rain, and the only sound was the steady drip of water falling from the trees. Ryan was sitting on their usual bench, his face obscured by the shadows of the night. He didn't acknowledge the teen's presence at first, his body language stiff and rigid. For a moment, the teen just stood there, his mind filled with questions, unsure of what was going to happen next. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice low and strained. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, without turning around. This isn't just some game, some mystery. This is our lives on the line. Our families. The truth we've been chasing? It's bigger than us. Bigger than anything we could have ever imagined." The teen's heart raced. This wasn't the Ryan he knew. The Ryan he knew was the one who made jokes to keep the mood light, who used humor to deflect when things got tough. But now, this Ryan was different. He sounded desperate, angry even, as if the weight of what was happening had crushed something inside him. The teen took a step closer, trying to read his friend's face in the dim light, but Ryan's expression remained hidden. "What are you talking about?" the teen asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I thought we were in this together. We've been trying to figure this out. We've been playing into their hands," Ryan interrupted, his voice sharp. "All of this, it's a trap. And now, they've given me an ultimatum. Either I walk away, or they'll come after me. And they won't stop until they've destroyed everything I care about." The teen's stomach twisted. This was it. The moment when the stakes got impossibly high. Ryan had been drawn into this just like him, but now he was being forced to choose between his safety and the truth. And as the teen stood there, the weight of the situation pressing down on him, he realized that he, too, was standing at the edge of an impossible choice. Was he going to walk away, to turn his back on everything he had learned, on everything he had fought to uncover? Or would he keep going, knowing that the cost could be everything, his family, his future, his very life? Ryan turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting the teen's for the first time since he arrived. "I'm not asking you to stop," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't do this anymore. I can't risk everything I've worked for. I have to protect my family. I have to protect myself." He paused, his breath catching in his throat. "But I'll be watching. I'll be waiting. If you need me, I'll be there. But you have to make your choice. And once you do, there's no going back." The teen's heart raced, his mind spinning. The air around him seemed to close in, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for him to make the impossible decision. His friend, the one person he had trusted above all others, was telling him to walk away. But he couldn't.
Not now.
Not after everything he had learned. The truth was too close. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and he could feel it. The final revelation was just within his reach. But as the teen looked at Ryan, something in his gut told him that this was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It wasn't just about the mystery of the old man, the woman, or the man in the suit. It was about loyalty, about trust, about survival. And as the rain continued to fall, drenching the park in an endless sheet of water, the teen realized that whatever decision he made would come with consequences far greater than he could possibly imagine. There was no easy way out. "Are you sure about this?" the teen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's face softened, his eyes reflecting the fear and uncertainty that he had been carrying. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I have to protect myself. And if you keep going down this path, I don't know what's going to happen to you. You need to decide what's more important, the truth or your life." The teen stood there, frozen, his mind racing. He felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him, suffocating him. In that moment, everything became clear. He wasn't just fighting for answers anymore. He was fighting for his very survival. But even as he made his decision, something nagged at him. What if Ryan was hiding something? What if this was part of the trap? The teen looked at his friend one last time, searching for any sign of the Ryan he had once known. But all he saw was a man torn between fear and desperation, and the realization that, in the end, they were both caught in a game they couldn't control. The teen turned away, his heart heavy with doubt and fear. No matter what he chose, he knew one thing for sure. The stakes had just gone up, and there was no turning back. The teen's heart pounded in his chest as he walked away from Ryan, every step feeling heavier than the last. The rain had started to fall harder, soaking his clothes, but he didn't care. His mind was spinning, and his body moved on autopilot, driven by the fear that seemed to consume him from the inside out. He had just been given an impossible choice, and he had no idea which way to turn. Was he going to listen to Ryan and walk away from the truth? Or was he going to plunge headfirst into the unknown, where the cost of discovery could be his life? But as he walked down the empty streets, something inside him snapped. He couldn't just walk away.
Not now.
Not when everything was on the edge of being exposed. The mystery that had seemed so simple at first, the vandalized fence, the strange man next door, the cryptic clues, was no longer just about one person or one event.
It was bigger than that.
It was bigger than him, bigger than Ryan, and maybe even bigger than anyone he knew. The conspiracy was sprawling, reaching out with tendrils that snaked into places he never imagined. As he reached his apartment, he found the door slightly ajar, the lock broken. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't left it like that. Panic surged through him as he pushed the door open, the darkness inside seeming to swallow him whole. His hand was trembling as he reached for his phone to call Ryan, but before he could press the first digit, a sharp voice cut through the silence, freezing him in his tracks. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the voice said, low and menacing. He spun around to see a figure in the shadows. He recognized the voice. It was familiar, but it wasn't anyone he expected to see. It was Detective Miller, the officer who had been investigating the case. The very same one who had seemed so helpful just days ago, the one who had promised to bring justice to the mystery of the vandalized fence and the strange events surrounding the elderly man. But now, in the dim light of his apartment, the teen could see something was off. The detective's face was twisted with a look that sent a chill straight to his spine. His eyes, once kind, were now cold, calculating. "You've been digging too deep," Miller said, stepping closer. "And you've uncovered more than you should have." The teen's stomach churned. This wasn't the man he thought he knew. He wasn't just dealing with a conspiracy anymore. He was dealing with someone who had been working against him from the very beginning. Someone he had trusted. "What's going on?" the teen asked, his voice shaking despite his attempts to stay calm. "You've been working with them, haven't you?" Miller didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes scanning the room like he was checking for something. The tension in the air was thick, as if the walls were closing in on him. The teen's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. He had been so focused on the clues, on the strange messages, on the way Ryan had pulled away, but he never saw this coming. The conspiracy was bigger than just a vandalized fence or a missing neighbor. It was a web of lies and deceit, reaching every corner of his life. The detective finally spoke, his voice dripping with an unsettling calmness. "You have no idea how deep this goes. It's not just about you anymore. It's about everything. About power, control, people you've never even heard of." The teen's mind was spinning. How had it come to this? How had his search for answers led him to this? To this moment of betrayal, with the very person he thought was working to solve the case now standing before him, his intentions dark and malicious. And what about Ryan? Had his friend been in on this all along? Was the betrayal even bigger than he realized? Questions swirled around him, but no answers seemed to make sense. Everything he had believed was being torn apart. "I thought we were on the same side," the teen said, his voice filled with frustration and hurt. "I thought you were trying to help me." Miller smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a friendly officer. It was cold, like the smile of someone who had already made their decision, someone who didn't care about the consequences anymore. "You were never on the side you thought you were. You were just a pawn in a game you didn't even understand." The teen's breath hitched as the weight of those words hit him like a punch to the gut. A pawn. Everything he had been doing, everything he had uncovered, had been a game all along. But who was the one controlling the pieces? Who was pulling the strings? As the detective stepped closer, the teen's heart began to race again. The sense of danger, of something unspeakably wrong, was overwhelming. "You're in too deep now," Miller said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's no turning back. You think you're going to expose the truth? You think you're going to make things right? You're wrong. You're just a part of the bigger picture now, and once you realize that, it'll be too late." Before the teen could respond, Miller moved suddenly, and in that moment, the teen realized just how much danger he was in. This wasn't just a simple mystery anymore. It was a trap, and he had been walking straight into it piece by piece, clue by clue. His body tensed as Miller's hand reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, sealed envelope. "This is for you," Miller said, tossing it on the table. "The next step in your journey. But be careful. Some doors are better left closed." The teen's heart was racing as he picked up the envelope. His hands shook, but he knew he had to open it. He had to know what was inside. As he tore open the seal and unfolded the paper, his eyes widened at the name on the page. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone he had never suspected, someone who had been playing both sides the entire time. This wasn't just about his life anymore. It was about something far more dangerous, and as the teen looked at the name on that piece of paper, he realized just how much he had underestimated the people behind this twisted conspiracy. The stakes had been raised. And now, everything he thought he knew had been turned on its head. The door to his apartment slammed shut behind him, and for the first time, the teen understood the full weight of the choices he had yet to make. There was no more running. There was no more hiding. It was time to face the truth, no matter what it cost. The rain pounded harder against the windows as the teen stood in the dimly lit room, the crumpled envelope still in his hand, his mind racing. Every piece of the puzzle had led him to this moment. His heart hammered in his chest as he stared at the name on the paper, a name he had never thought to question, a person he had trusted without hesitation. The truth had been staring him in the face all along, but he hadn't seen it. Now it was all falling into place, and the weight of what he had uncovered was suffocating. This was no longer a game. This was survival. The stakes had never been higher. He knew what he had to do. He had to confront the person who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, the one who had manipulated him from the start, the one who had used him as a pawn in a dangerous game. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had no choice. It was time to face the truth, whatever that truth was. There was no turning back now. The door to the abandoned warehouse creaked open, and the teen's breath caught in his throat. It was dark, save for a single light flickering overhead. He took a step forward, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness, his senses heightened, alert to every creak, every shift in the air. This was it, the place where everything had led. where all the questions would be answered, or where they would lead to an even darker place. He moved cautiously, his fingers brushing against the rough walls, every sound amplifying in the silence. As he reached the center of the warehouse, he saw him, the detective, Miller, standing in the shadows, a cold smile on his face. It was like everything in the room froze, and the air grew thick with tension. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The teen's mind was reeling with a million questions, but none of them seemed to matter now. This was the final confrontation. Everything was about to come to a head. "You came," Miller said, his voice low and dripping with disdain. "I knew you would. You always were too curious for your own good." The teen's hands balled into fists at his sides, his body tense with a mixture of fear and rage. "Why?" he demanded, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Why all of this? Why me? You were supposed to help me." Miller chuckled, the sound dark and twisted. "Help you? I wasn't here to help you, kid. You were just a means to an end. A tool, a way to keep the wheels of this operation turning. You think it was just about a broken fence and an old man? You couldn't have been more wrong. This goes far beyond you. Far beyond anything you could ever understand." The teen's blood ran cold as the weight of Miller's words sank in. He had been so focused on the small pieces of the puzzle, on the vandalism, on the strange man next door, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't just about one neighborhood, one person, or even one case. This was a much larger conspiracy, a network of corruption and power that reached into places he couldn't have imagined. And now he was standing in the middle of it, completely exposed. "You've been working with them," the teen spat, his voice shaking with disbelief. "All this time, you were using me, getting me to uncover everything for you." Miller's smile widened, and he stepped closer. "You think I'm the mastermind?"
No, kid.
"I'm just a small part of a much bigger picture. You've uncovered something that was never meant to be uncovered. But now that you have, there's no going back. Do you really think you're the first person to try and dig into this?"
No.
"They'll come for you just like they've come for everyone else who's gotten too close." A shiver ran down the teen's spine. This was bigger than just him, bigger than anyone he had encountered. Miller had been playing both sides all along. But the detective wasn't the only one who had betrayed him. There were others, more powerful figures who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. People who had controlled everything, and he had just scratched the surface. Before he could react, Miller reached into his jacket, pulling out a small flash drive. "This," he said, holding it up, "is everything. The key to everything you've been searching for. The truth you wanted. But be careful. Once you open it, there's no going back." The teen's hands shook as he took the flash drive. His mind raced. What was on it? What had Miller meant? He didn't trust the detective, didn't trust anything anymore, but something deep down told him this was the key to understanding everything. It was his only chance to uncover the full truth, to expose the corruption that had twisted his world. But even as he inserted the drive into his laptop, he felt the weight of the decision he was making. Was it worth it? Was he willing to risk everything, to go up against forces that could destroy him, just for the truth? He clicked open the files, and as the documents loaded, his eyes widened in shock. There it was, the final piece of the puzzle. A list of names. High-profile figures. Business tycoons. Politicians. People he had never imagined. People who had been involved in a massive, underground operation that spanned years, touching every corner of society. The vandalized fence, the strange man next door, they were just the tip of the iceberg. The teen realized with a sickening jolt that he had been lured into this conspiracy, drawn into it by a series of carefully placed events, all leading to this moment. He was in too deep. But there was one name on the list that made his stomach drop. Ryan. His best friend. The one person he had trusted above everyone else. His name was on the list. And next to it, in cold, black letters, was the word agent. His heart stopped. Everything he had believed, everything he had fought for, suddenly shattered. Ryan wasn't just his friend. He wasn't just a kid trying to help him uncover the truth. He had been working with Miller all along. He had been part of the operation. The betrayal cut deeper, than anything else. In that moment, the teen realized the full scope of the danger he was in. It wasn't just Miller. It was Ryan, too. And as Miller stepped forward, his smile widening with satisfaction, the teen understood that the truth wasn't just going to destroy the conspiracy. It was going to destroy him. "You're too late," Miller said softly, the words dripping with finality. "The game's already over." But just as the teen's mind spun with the revelation, everything went dark. The soft hum of a police siren echoed in the distance as the teen sat on the cold ground, his head spinning, his body numb. Everything had gone black for what felt like an eternity, but when his vision finally returned, he was no longer in the dark, abandoned warehouse. He was sitting in the back of an ambulance, the lights of a city flashing outside the windows as they rushed down the street. He barely registered the paramedic's voice, asking him if he was all right, if he could hear them. His mind was too far gone, too caught up in the whirlwind of betrayal, of secrets revealed, of a world he never knew existed until it was too late. The files on the flash drive had been his ticket to understanding the full scope of the operation that had nearly swallowed him whole, and the names he had uncovered still haunted him. He had thought the worst was over when the police arrived and took Miller into custody, but even in the sterile calm of the ambulance, he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Miller had been just one player, a small cog in a much larger machine. The conspiracy had been far-reaching, involving people he would never have suspected, people in positions of power who controlled the narrative, shaped the laws, and manipulated lives for their own gain. The teen had thought he was chasing a simple mystery, a harmless curiosity that would give him answers. But instead, he had stumbled into a world that could crush him if he wasn't careful. His thoughts drifted back to Ryan, his best friend. The name on that list had been a blow he hadn't been prepared for. It was one thing to uncover corruption, to find enemies in the shadows, but to realize that someone you trusted, someone you had shared your life with, was part of the very thing that had put you in danger. It was a betrayal so deep that it made the teen's chest tighten with every breath. But what could he do? Ryan had been working undercover, a part of the operation, and the truth of that stung more than anything else. He had spent days processing it, trying to understand why, but there was no clear answer. Sometimes, the truth was just too complicated for anyone to truly comprehend. Ryan was out there somewhere, a shadow now, a reminder of the lines people were willing to cross for a cause, no matter how justified they believed it to be. As the ambulance pulled into a hospital, the teen's heart sank. He was alive, yes, but he felt a sense of emptiness gnawing at him, like something precious had been ripped away from him forever. There was no going back to the way things were. He couldn't unlearn what he had discovered, couldn't ignore the knowledge that some truths were better left buried. The doors of the ambulance opened, and he was helped out by a pair of paramedics. The police had been waiting for him, their stern faces betraying nothing. They'd asked him questions, but there were still things he couldn't explain. Some parts of the puzzle would remain a mystery, and some things were better left unsaid. Days turned into weeks, and the teen found himself in a quiet apartment, staring at the wall, lost in thought. The police had handled the case, Miller was behind bars, and Ryan's whereabouts remained a mystery. Life was slowly returning to normal, but the scars remained. Every time he looked out the window, every time he stepped outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching him. It wasn't just paranoia. It was the knowledge that the conspiracy was still alive in some form, still operating in the background, even if he couldn't see it. There were whispers of other investigations, rumors that Miller had only been a small part of something much larger. And the more the teen heard, the more he realized that this was far from over. The police were keeping tabs on him, he knew that. There were calls from time to time, asking if he had remembered anything else, if he had uncovered any new details. But they were always vague, careful, like they were hiding something too. He wondered if the people behind the conspiracy would ever stop, or if they would keep going, pulling the strings from the shadows as they always had. Would they come for him? Would they come for anyone who had gotten too close? He didn't know. What he did know was that the world wasn't as safe as it once seemed. The truth was far messier than he could have ever imagined, and the more he uncovered, the more he realized that the system was built to protect its own. But what if the very system he had once trusted was the one that needed to be taken down? Was he willing to go that far? The questions lingered, unanswered, a part of him still searching for something more. And then one day, there was a knock at his door. It was a simple thing, a tap, a pause, and then silence. The teen hesitated, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Was it the police? Someone else from the conspiracy? Or was it someone entirely new, someone who had come to finish what Miller had started? When he opened the door, there was no one there. Just a small, unmarked package sitting on the doorstep. His pulse quickened as he picked it up, noticing the familiar logo from the documents he had uncovered, the same symbol that had been present in every file, in every trace of the conspiracy. The package felt like a final message, a signal that this was far from over. Inside, there was only one thing, a single photograph. It was of a house, one he recognized from his investigation, but it wasn't the house he had been searching for. It was the house across the street, Ryan's house. The photo was old, taken years before, but it was clear. In the background of the picture, standing in front of the house, was Ryan. But he wasn't alone. Someone else stood beside him, someone the teen never expected to see again. The detective, Miller. The package was a warning, a sign that the web was still tangled, still stretching far beyond what he could grasp. And as the teen stood there, holding the photograph, he realized that this was only the beginning. The conspiracy hadn't ended. It had only evolved. And he was right back in the center of it all. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the camera zoomed out, the screen went black, leaving the audience to ponder the endless possibilities. What would happen next? What more was there to uncover? And how far would the teen go to expose the truth, no matter the cost? The answers were still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found.